Well, hello and welcome. There's so many people here that I assume you're here to see Star Wars The Force Awakens. I'm afraid this will be a little bit less entertaining than that. But, anyway, it's very good to be with you. I want to share with you a very small bit of insight, primarily from Kierkegaard, who is one of my great heroes, one of my favorite philosophers. When you come into my office at Spring Hill, I have a whole wall of friends. Most of them are canonized saints, but there are a few non-canonized saints that I hope will eventually be recognized, and Kierkegaard is among them. So I'm giving you the best that I know, and I hope that you'll find it also really very helpful. So here's our starting point. This is a painting depicting one of the famous dialogues of Plato called the Symposium. And symposium in Greek simply means drinking together. So the great philosophy of Western history comes at something like a fraternity party, which is depicted here. I assume that this right here, this figure is Socrates there. The Symposium apparently was a real event, actually happened in the life of Socrates, possibly of Plato. And what happened in the midst of this apparently bawdy evening was that the host said, well, we would like to hear some speeches of some real substance, and our theme is love. So whoever gives the best speech on love will be declared the great victor of the evening. And so they each take turns giving stories about love. And it comes time for Socrates to get up there and give his story. And he tells about an encounter that he had with a woman named Diotima. Now in this is a painting by, I believe it's a Slovakian painter, 19th century. He apparently didn't read the Symposium very closely because Socrates says that it was when he was a young man that he met Diotima, and here you can see already a man of sort of middle age with a young disciple, presumably Plato. What you need to see in your mind to get the story that Socrates himself told is picture him as a young man here and just ignore the figure there. And along comes this philosopher, this lover of wisdom, Diotima. And she engages Socrates. Normally Socrates is the one that's stirring things up and engaging people, but she engages him. And she asks him, what is love? What does love want? And how does love go about getting it? And I highly encourage that you read the whole dialogue, because the whole dialogue is just terrific. The main thing that we're going to focus on tonight is her third question, which is about what love does. And here's how she puts it. We would rightly say that lovers literally love, eros. We would rightly say that lovers do something with eagerness and zeal. So what is it precisely that they do? What does love do? How does love operate? That's the great question. And for this, we turn to Napoleon Dynamite. Now this means nothing to, if you're over 30 years old, you have no idea what Napoleon Dynamite is. And I myself only saw it when I was past my prime, really. I didn't get it the first 3 times that I saw it. Then I saw it a 4th and 5th time, and I understood it. But there's this key scene in Napoleon Dynamite. Let's see if I can actually make this thing work. And unfortunately, I have to explain, I'm going to have to probably do the dialogue for you, because the sound system in here is not working terribly well. So we'll see what happens. But this is a key scene in Napoleon Dynamite in which this man is going door to door trying to sell things that no one really wants. It's like Tupperware or something like that. But then he pulls out the pièce de résistance. Let's see if the technology will cooperate. He says, I bet you folks don't have one of these. And she says, I want that. Which is exactly what love does, right? It seems, in pop culture, this is the way that we think about love. I want that. That's the first kind of reaction that seems to be involved in love. Well, let's go back for a moment to Diotima and Socrates. So here you have Socrates on the left, and when Diotima poses this question to him. All he can come up with is a big question mark. This is the young Socrates now. You know, he hasn't formulated his thoughts on all these things. He can't figure out how to respond. What does love want? How does it operate? He can't really give a response. So I want to challenge you for a second. Before we go on to Diotima and her response, I want to ask you, take a second and think, how would you respond to that question? How does love operate? What does love do? How close does Napoleon Dynamite come to the way that we think about love operating? Well, here's what Diotima says. It's very strange. In fact, I think it's one of the most astonishing claims in the whole of Western philosophy. It is astonishing. She says, well, I'll tell you, Socrates, since you don't understand. What love does is give birth in beauty. And to really make the point very clear, because that's still a bit of a question mark for us, she says, let me say it again a little bit later in the dialogue, what love wants is not beauty, as you think it is, young Socrates. And here she adds another word to just reinforce the same point. It's reproduction and giving birth in beauty. Which is a strange claim. Very strange. I don't think any one of us would have come up with that if we had to write down our answer a moment ago. What love does, the way that love operates, what it wants to do is to give birth, to reproduce. At which point, Socrates says, I haven't the foggiest clue what you're talking about. It would take divination to figure out what it is that you mean. I don't know. Well, Diotima, I'm not going to go through the whole of her argument here, but she takes a little turn at this point, and she uses a strategy that Aristotle will refer to later in the Metaphysics. She says, okay, well, let's just look around the world and see how things operate. Let's just look and see what's there. It's very scientific. Now compare that to how we would normally deal with the question of love. We would put on our earphones and we would listen to some music and we would turn inward and we would try to figure out from our own experience, subjective experience, how love operates. That's not the way the ancients worked. They were realists. Plato, Aristotle, they were realists. So they want to look around and see, well, what do we find in reality? And so here's what Aristotle says in the Metaphysics. What has corrected all of our mistaken ideas in the past is, as people advanced, it was reality itself that showed them the way and compelled them to search. So Diotima is going to look and see how things actually work, looking around the world. And here's what she notices. Whenever animals or persons draw near to beauty, they become gentle. And they put on cologne and they try to smell good. And they become joyfully disposed, and then, by golly, they give birth and they reproduce. That's just simply what happens if you don't intervene. And so when we have this word reproduction, which is her emphasizing ever more strongly this idea that love gives birth, she's using a word that will take on great significance for Christians later with the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament. The word that she's using there is genesis. We will say Genesis later. I just flagged that to your attention now because I want to come back to that a little bit later. What love does is it generates. It makes a genesis. That's the characteristic way that love operates. And then you try to tell that to these people here. What? No. Love seems precisely to get in the way. I mean, giving birth seems to get in the way of love. We try to find all kinds of ways around it and all this. And so I found this is a great statistical analysis. Reasons for unintended pregnancy. Now, read this as a philosopher. Don't read this as a social scientist. I'm a social scientist. I'm asking you now to read this as a philosopher. And it's got all this analysis of why unintended pregnancy occurs, and we've got instrumental reasons, the failure of contraception, the non-use of contraception. And I think to myself, I look at this as a philosopher and I say, I think there's a category missing here. I think it's failure to read Plato. That's the real reason for unintended pregnancy. You clearly have misunderstood the problem here, because pregnancy is exactly what you intended, right? And so it changes to 100%. Failure to read Plato is the reason for unintended pregnancy. This is all a bit tongue-in-cheek, but I think you get the point, that she's making an astonishing claim here. We have to see, we can't domesticate Diotima on this point. We can't defame what she's saying here. It's a strange and jarring and astonishing claim that she's making. See it again, what love really wants is not beauty as you think it is, kind of naively. It's reproduction and giving birth in beauty. Here's another way of thinking about that. Eros passionately wants to give, not to take. And we naively think of Eros as wanting to take for itself. I want that, right? That's the way that we tend to think about erotic desire, Eros, love in its most unreflective form, right? I want that. And yet what Diotima is claiming is that what Eros really wants is to give, which just seems totally bizarre. And so at this point I ask you, is this an answer? Or has Diotima merely posed another more profound question? The question all of a sudden seems to be, if Diotima's right, I don't know the first thing about love. I don't know the first thing about Eros. It's profound. And so this is my question for this paper that I wrote and what I want to share with you tonight. What in the world could she possibly be talking about? Well, it turns out that a lot of people are puzzled about this. This is a painting depicting Dionysius the Areopagite, who took as his name the name of a figure in the Acts of the Apostles, who was a real person, Dionysius, who listened and perhaps taught at the Areopagus. This, though, is a 6th century Syrian monk who felt such a kinship with this figure from the Acts of the Apostles that he actually took this as his religious name. So he's a 6th century Syrian monk, and he's so deeply moved by Plato. He's a Neoplatonist. He's a Christian Neoplatonist. He spends a lot of time reflecting on Plato in the light of Christ, in the light of the event of Revelation. And he says something maybe even more astonishing about this passage from the Symposium. Before I show you what that astonishing thing is, I have to remind you, as you know, the Christian scriptures maintain the core claim about who God is that God is love. John will go on and on in flights of theological reflection on this. God is love, say the Christian scriptures. Well, then notice this. To those listening properly to the divine themes, the name love, and here in Greek he's using agape, which is the way that we typically refer in the Johannine letters to the love that God is. So the name love, agape, is used by the sacred writers in divine revelation with the exact same meaning as the term yearning. You could translate that erotic desire. Eros. This made people in the 6th century deeply uncomfortable. If it hasn't made you uncomfortable, I might have to say it 2 or 3 more times. Right? God is love, and if you really understand Eros and agape, you have to be able to apply both of those forms of love to God. So that there's this new, you don't think about these as 2 different things. Eros agape is precisely the love that God is and has and manifests. I see some furrowed brows, which is a good thing. You should read the rest of Dionysius on this point. God is Eros agape, which means probably that we need to deepen our understanding of Eros. The our culture tends to think of it as kind of like something that goes in the shadows and is dirty and all this. Well, it's a problem with the culture, not with the concept itself. We're not going to linger with Dionysius, though, because I primarily want to let Kierkegaard speak here. I want to let him give us some insight into how it is that love, this yearning love, this desire that seems to well up from a place that we don't understand, how is it that that love, what it most profoundly wants, is to give, when in fact we tend to experience it as wanting to take. So Kierkegaard will help us on 2 points here. And this is where I get to recommend, don't buy my book, buy Kierkegaard's book. He has a wonderful book. Kierkegaard wrote a lot of things, but he wrote a wonderful book called The Works of Love. And what I'm going to give you is only about 3 pages worth of material out of this enormous book. So if you find it insightful, I highly recommend spending some time with Kierkegaard on the rest of what he has to say. But here are the 2 things we're going to look at. He tells us something about this paradox about love in the distinction that it wants to overcome, the distinction of mine and yours. And then we're going to take a look at the conclusion of that series of thoughts in which he looks at what it means to love individuality. That's where it all is headed. If none of that makes sense yet, that's good, because we haven't made it there yet. Here's, though, where I have to ask you to do a little bit more work. I have very few graphics for the rest of the presentation. Now it's turning to philosophy, so we have to work with some words. Here's the setup for the whole set of experiments, thought experiments he wants to do. Here it is. There is no distinction for lovers between mine and yours. Remarkable. There are a you and an I, and yet no mine and yours. I'm going to pause to let that kind of sink in. So now he wants to kind of go a little bit deeper here. Same idea, but he wants to go a little deeper. For without you and I, there is no love. But with mine and yours, there is no love. But mine and yours are in fact formed out of you and I, and consequently seem necessary wherever you and I are. Okay, if you feel like we're going in circles now, stay with me, stay with me. What he's doing here is he's saying we've got on the one hand this possessive idea of mine and yours, and it seems like for all the world, in order to talk about what is mine and what is yours, there must be a subject I and a subject you. If you get rid of the 2 subjects, love disappears. But love wants to get rid of the distinction between what is mine and what is yours. So it's got to do some incredible trick here to delink the subject I from the possessive pronoun mine. And it's got to separate the subject you from the possessive pronoun yours, so that we can somehow get, the final result is, there's no longer mine and yours, but there remains these 2 subjects, I and you. That's the requirement for love. With me so far? Okay. Then he says, now this holds true everywhere except in love, which is the fundamental revolution. It is usually the case that I and you have to go with mine and yours in exactly the way that he's talked about before. But in love, in a way that he's going to have to try to explain to us, something happens in which these are delinked and something new transpires. How in the world do you do that? Well, he proposes, I asked this question. How in the world does love get rid of this distinction, mine and yours? And since Valentine's Day is coming up soon. I want to propose to you the typical way that we tend to think about how we get rid of this distinction, mine and yours. How does love usually operate? We do this. We take out our sweetheart candy and we give this to our Valentine. And what do we say to them? Be mine. See, that's how I want to get rid of the distinction between mine and yours. I want to make you and everything of yours mine. Which is exactly the way that we naively think about eros. I want that. I want to make it mine. I want to make it an extension of me. And I mean, I think about this, like in second grade, I was giving this to little girls and things, and think, oh, I had seriously bad philosophy at age 7. But that's how we think about it. So, what does Kierkegaard say? He's got to prove this to us. He can't simply make claims, he's got to prove it. So he proposes an experiment. He proposes a couple of experiments. Experiment number 1. This is what I love about philosophy, by the way. We have some real, I'm not a real philosopher. I'm a lawyer and a politician and a hack, a philosophy hack. We have some real philosophers in the room. But here's what's amazing about philosophy. You can sit in a room, doesn't matter where you are in the world, and you can just do an experiment. And seeing the results of this experiment can completely and totally change the way that you understand the world. It's so much better than chemistry. I mean, I hope there are no natural scientists here. We don't require anything. It's easy, cheap to run a university like this. You just sit in the room and you think and you do experiments. So that's what philosophy does. Experiment number 1, here's what Kierkegaard says. Okay, well, let's first try to take away completely the distinction yours from the distinction mine and yours, which is be mine. That's the little Valentine candy. Let's try that first. What happens when we say to someone, be mine? When we try to take away the distinction yours. Kierkegaard says something very surprising here. So I want to give you a second. I want to be quiet for a second and let you think. Do the experiment in your head. What happens when we get rid of the distinction yours? What's the result? And Kierkegaard says, then we have crime. For the thief, the robber, the seducer, and the bandit all recognize no yours at all in the distinction mine and yours. That's precisely the definition of a criminal. I don't recognize that anything is actually yours because it's all potentially mine. And I will take it when I very well like to. That's the definition of crime. It makes one into a criminal. Now he has to put the case in an extreme form so that we can see in broad outline what's actually happening there. But then something very interesting happens in the results of this experiment. What happens to the person who gets rid of the distinction yours in favor of having everything for himself? Here's the result. Precisely for this reason, the distinction mine also completely disappears. Now, I put ... because I want to explain something that it's not worth putting all on the screen. Kierkegaard says at this point, think about justice. Think about how justice treats criminals. Okay, so you don't believe that anything is other people's? You don't believe that there's a yours out there? Well, we're going to lock you up. And now you have no mind. So we have this intuitive sense in our justice system. If you don't respect the distinction yours, well, then you get no mind. We're locking you away. But Kierkegaard thinks it goes much deeper than that. He thinks you can actually see a philosophical result and not just a sociological result. And it's the philosophical result that's more important here. So that's what we've got to understand after the ellipsis. The richer the criminal becomes through the stolen yours, all these things, the less mine he has. If this sounds to you like reading a fortune cookie and you can't for the life of you figure out what that means, let's read it again and then I'll give my attempt to explain what I think he's saying there. The richer the criminal becomes through the stolen yours, by taking all these things to himself, in fact, the less mine he has. A couple ways of understanding that. One is surely the fact, imagine a great criminal now, a great robber, who takes more and more and more things. Well, relative to the things that actually do belong to him, the many things that he has stolen totally engulf this small little thing that was his, to the point where all we can really talk about him having is other people's stuff. That's one way of understanding what he's saying there. The more that I take from other people, relatively speaking, the less of mine I have. It started out as like 100% mine, and then I stole a Ferrari. And it's like, okay, now I've got like 10% mine. And then I took, I broke into a house and whatever. And now it's down to like 1% mine. The more and more I take, the less of my own that I have. It's one way of understanding. But I think there's an even deeper way here. I think this operates at many levels. What the person who recognizes nothing as yours has done is he's actually lost all sense of a distinction between me and you, which means he's lost himself. There's no me left because the whole of the world is basically me, which means that there's no me, really. That's the deepest level of philosophical thought that's going on. But I think it's operating at these different levels. The mistake of the criminal is that in the process of trying to get more and more, he's lost himself. Well, we've got to do another experiment here. So what's experiment number 2? Okay, go back, please. Now, take away completely the distinction mine. So imagine the sweetheart candy again. Rather than saying, be mine, the candy says, I'm yours. So experiment 2, now take away completely the distinction mine from the distinction mine and yours. And what happens here? We're not dealing with criminal, we're not dealing with crime, we're now actually dealing with love. Then we have the sacrificing one who renounces himself in all things. We have true love. Now, he hasn't given us an argument for this yet. He's making a claim, and it's going to take him longer to explain the results of this experiment than the last one, because this is the one where things get really weird. If you thought the last one was weird, this one gets even weirder. He says this is the result. At the same time, the category yours completely disappears. The person who has said, I'm giving myself totally over, I have no mine anymore, something remarkable happens, and all of a sudden, the distinction yours also disappears for this person. Now, back up for a second. What the criminal wanted was to go straight to making the distinction yours disappear. I want to take everything from you and make it mine. But look at what's happened. I now give away the mine, and I get the thing that the criminal wanted, which is everything else. How in the world is this possible? Everything becomes the possession of the true lover. Well, hold on, Kierkegaard. It sounds to me like you're selling a bill of goods, because you haven't explained how this happens. So let's see what he says. When in fact I know of nothing which is mine, when not a thing is mine, then everything is indeed yours. Which it also is in a certain sense. And sacrificing love considers it so. Step 1. Nevertheless, everything, unconditionally everything, cannot be yours, since yours is a relationship of polarity, and there is no polarity in everything. There's the key step of the argument, and we're going to have to try to understand that. He's speaking in technical terms here, so my job is to try to make that a little bit clearer. Let's look at the last little step here, and then I'll go back and try to help us work our way through it. then something wonderful happens, he says. Heaven's blessing on self-renunciation's love. In the mysterious understanding of blessedness, everything becomes his. Belongs to him who had no mind, who in self-renunciation made all of this yours. And here's where, this is why I love Kierkegaard. It blows your mind, and it's deeply Christian, and you can't quite figure it out, but you want to ponder it. That's what's so great about Kierkegaard. So what is he saying here? Look at step 2 again. I've given everything away. I consider everything of mine to belong totally to you. I've given everything away. I really consider it yours. But in fact, when we're talking about everything, not partial, not this part and that part and that part, well, in everything, there is no division. And if there's no division, there's no distinction, and therefore there's no mine and yours. Is it a card trick? What do you think? Is it a card trick? And here, what I'm going to try to do for the rest of the lecture is show you how you already know this and you already believe this in the most standard, concrete examples from daily life. You already believe what Kierkegaard is showing you. If I give everything away, there is no room for there being a division or a part. And so, miraculously, somehow, I gain everything back. With more. With more. It's heaven's multitude. It's an extraordinary thing about the feature of reality. Well, how do we prove it? Okay, well, I'm going to start from Scripture, and then I want to go to some examples from daily life. Okay, here is the story of the prodigal son. And notice at this key moment in the story of the prodigal son, the father says, not to the son who's returning, not to the prodigal, but to the older brother who's really, really angry that he never even gets so much as a little goat. You didn't even, all these years I've stayed here and I've served you, you didn't give me anything. I got that Ford Pinto when I turned 15. It's like, come on. Nothing. And what the father says, notice what the father says. He says an extraordinary thing. He says, son, everything that I have belongs to you. Everything I have is yours. It's the opposite of the little Valentine candy. It's not, be mine, I want to make you an extension of myself. It's, I've given you everything that I have, and if I had more, I would give you more. The reason that I propose that we think about this is not because it's a Bible passage. I mean, I don't think that really, we don't have to resort to that. We're doing philosophy tonight. We can talk about theological implications, but we're doing philosophy. I think what this illustrates is a basic principle that every parent knows. Everything is yours. The moment when the little baby comes out and you just melt and you're like, oh my golly, okay, yeah, you can have anything you want, you know? A $50,000 wedding, okay, yeah, everything. There's not a single thing that a parent would not give that is good to his or her child. We just know that, and we don't even have to reflect on that. We don't have to do a great deal of philosophical reflection on that. It's just something about who we are, our constitution. It's something about reality. Parents simply want to give everything they have to their children in a remarkable thing, in a remarkable way. And so they stoop down and help them to learn to ride a bike and all this. Everything I have is yours. And here's where I want to suggest a way to help us purify, to understand more deeply love, eros. Because we do see eros operating here. I have deep yearnings for you, my child. I want so much for you. That you would be happy and successful and fully fulfilled makes me happy and successful and fully fulfilled. I have so placed my eye in you that every good done to you becomes good done to me. And that's what Kierkegaard is talking about. I consider every good done to you as done to me. Therefore, I've given everything away, And lo and behold, everything has come back. Miraculously. How does it happen? Well, here's a question then. If we've gotten rid of the distinction mine and yours, have we also simultaneously gotten ourselves into a scrap by getting rid of the distinction you and I? And now I want you to think of the smother. Do you all know what a smother is? Or the helicopter parent? Yes? The smother is the mother who's so involved in making the child happy that it's really the mother's happiness in all this. It happens with fathers too. When we've gotten rid of the distinction mine and yours, have we simultaneously gotten rid of the distinction you and I? Have I simply made you an extension of myself, but seemingly at a much higher level, at a much more noble level? Well, Kierkegaard has something to say about this. And what he has to say requires first looking at the Trinity. It's a philosophical gaze. There's good reason to have a theological gaze at the Trinity. But here we're trying to understand something through rational reflection about the Trinity. This is that famous icon by Rublev, the Russian, I believe he was a monk. Yes, was he a monk? Yeah. This is the famous icon of the Trinity, 15th century. There's way too much to say about this, so I only want to say one thing. One is, let's reflect on what the Trinity is. 3 persons in perfect unity without destroying the reality of individuality. And that sends philosophers and theologians for centuries into desperate attempts to understand how this could even be possible. Perfect unity without destroying individuality. But notice, this is what people have noticed by studying and praying with this icon. Here you have the Trinity seated around the table, but notice this space right here. There's a space at the table for the viewer of the icon. This is not a little 3-person group that's like a clique in the calf. This is for the Spring Hill students. There may be another seat here, but there's no room for you. This kind of thing. This is not an inward-looking community that is so wrapped up in itself that it has no room for anyone else. The Trinity has an enormous amount of room for other people to sit around the table with them without destroying their individuality. Creation for Christians is not going to be a fall from a perfect state, as it will be for some of the Platonists, the Neoplatonists in particular. It's not a fall from a more perfect state. It's an opening up because the Trinity itself has room for more persons in its life. I think this is one of the most beautiful messages of Christianity. God has room in his inner divine life for me, which is totally bizarre. I mean, really reflect on that. That is totally bizarre. Why would God, who is perfect in himself, need to bother with anything else? And not only that, but to genuinely allow this other being to be a real individual. It makes no sense. This is where you see really the transformation of Christianity. God respects individuality and wants more and more of it. Here's how Kierkegaard puts it. It is simply the inexhaustible swell of goodness in the goodness of God that he, the Almighty, nevertheless gives in a way that the receiver obtains individuality. Now, compare that to the way that you and I have given sometimes. Oh, I got you this is like the Donald Trump thing, right? Oh, I got you a huge gift, the best gift. No one else is going to give you a big gift, this kind of thing. I give in such a way that the gift refers back to me. I love to do that. I put my name in this big card on there. And, this is always, I'm going to a wedding at the end of May, and I'm trying to find a way to give a a sincere gift that doesn't refer back to me, but I can just sense that, like, oh, I hope I've got the best wedding gift, you know? I know them better than anyone else. But see, that kind of gift is making a claim on the person that I'm giving to. It's making them an extension of myself again. And God does not do that. God doesn't simply make us an extension of himself. When he gives in such a way that the receiver understands the thing given as if it just belongs to him or her, respecting the individuality of the one who is receiving. He who created out of nothing nevertheless creates individuality, so that creation over against him shall not be nothing. Not like a magic show, not just a mere extension of his own life. Although it is taken from nothing, and is nothing, and yet becomes something, individuality. That's how God gives. Kierkegaard at this point, this is like Kierkegaard at his best. He imagines a conversation between God and the slightest, most insignificant, most plain-looking, poor little overlooked flower in a field full of really impressive flowers. And I think it's like that one right there, basically. I mean, he's kind of short, you know. If the shade catches him the wrong way, he's not going to grow anymore. He's stunted, right? Imagine a conversation now, says Kierkegaard, between Almighty God and this little pathetic little flower. And if you think that that's kind of charming, well, I mean, am I that different, really? Am I really that different from that little insignificant flower? If I'm honest. Here's what the flower says. Let me be something for myself. Something distinctive. Let me somehow add to the glory of the universe. Please, that's what I'm asking. But you're just this little insignificant flower. No, God says, imagines Kierkegaard, that love helps it to become something with its own distinctive individual characteristic. That's the way that love operates. It doesn't like trample the flower and be like, no, I'm going over here to the orchid or something, you know? No, even this little pathetic little flower, God sees that the mere being, the mere existence is good, and so he helps it to be. That's the way that love gives while respecting individuality. The true lover does not, this applies to you and me as much as to God, the true lover does not love his own individuality. He rather loves each human being, and you might say each creature, according to the other's individuality. What I love about you is that you are not me. You are not a mere extension of me. You are you, and I love the fact that you are you, an individual. And I don't in any way want to stamp on your individuality. I want to help foster it. That's what God says, remarkably. This is compared to our normal disposition, which Kierkegaard describes as small-mindedness, pusillanimity. Small-mindedness, by contrast, has fastened itself tightly to a very particular shape and form, which it calls its own. If you've never read C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce, there's a wonderful character in The Great Divorce who's exactly like this. And he's just shocked when anyone's not like him. And in fact, the way that Kierkegaard describes it in this next quote is precisely the way that C.S. Lewis describes it. This person thinks that they have the definitive form and that no other form can exist out there. And so, when small-mindedness sees genuine individuality, it feels like a refutation. It's like, oh, you're not me. Well, then you must be lesser. It feels, therefore, a damp, unpleasant anxiety upon observing another person's individuality. And nothing is more important than to get rid of it. I think Kierkegaard has hit the nail on the head here. It's like, oh, I just can't stand that person, you know, this kind of thing. I mean, I don't think he's off in fairyland here. I think he's describing something that we experience all the time. When I slip into small-mindedness, all I want is to just get rid of everything that's different from me. In fact, I might run for president and make that my campaign motto. Please watch Fox News tonight just so that Donald Trump doesn't have a chance to be president. Small-mindedness cannot stand a genuine individual. And so, what do? We try to let the Trinity form us. I mean, I think that's what we're trying to do at Spring Hill College. It's what we're trying to do in any Catholic university. Let the Trinity genuinely imprint its unique life on me and my community. Deep, perfect unity that insists on individuality, respecting individuality, fostering individuality. That is how the Trinity wants to form the world. Here's what Kierkegaard says about it. He who has dared before God, notice, and that's his emphasis, not mine. You have to do this in the sight of God. It has to be with a contemplative gaze. He who has dared before God to be himself has authentic individuality and has come to know what God has already given to him. In the same sense, he believes completely in the individuality of every single person. If I genuinely reflect on everything that's been given to me who is this little, insignificant flower, you think, why? Why in the world would he bother? If I really reflect on that and let that penetrate into the depth of my interior life, then you better believe it's going to change the way I go into the world. And I'm going to find every little flower and rejoice in it and do everything I can to foster it. That is the result of this philosophical investigation, says Kierkegaard. So, I think what she should be saying at this point in Napoleon Dynamite is not, I want that, but what do I want? Philosophy begins with a question. It wants to know an answer to something. It requires deep introspection and reflection on reality, and reality will teach me. And what it teaches is that I am to love individuality. And with that, I will take your questions.